Welcome to Boring Money, Rich Life. I'm your host, Joy Hicks, and today we're going to talk about Klarna. So, Klarna is now officially publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and they actually went public on September 10th, which was last week. Now, Klarna, if you don't know what Klarna is, it's a buy now, pay later type of company where you can purchase something now, you can kind of make payments, and it's kind of an alternative to traditional banking with credit cards. So it is a Swedish company, which is interesting. And their CEO did say that they do feel like the US is a great market for Klarna because we are such big consumers, which I feel like there's no shocker about that. Like the average household is in credit card debt. So it definitely makes sense that a consumer type of fintech app is looking to launch in the US. So I feel like Klarna is kind of interesting because I did kind of talk about Klarna back in April because at that time, that's when they were initially looking to do their IPO. Now, everything that happened with like tariffs and there was a lot of concern about whether goods were going to go up super astronomically. We didn't really know what the cost of regular retail items was going to be. A lot of companies did decide to kind of like halt their IPOs at that time. So it is interesting that Klarna was still able to IPO within the same year. They just kind of delayed it a few months. So I feel like that is pretty interesting. So there was definitely a lot of enthusiasm around Klarna going public. A lot of people are kind of interested to see how it does and how it grows. And initially, they kind of priced their IPO shares at $40. And then the day of, they were kind of trading at around $52 per share, which was about a 30% jump. They got all the way to about $57 per share, and then they closed at around $45 per share. And with their IPO, they are actually now valued at around 15 billion, which is interesting because I was doing a little bit of research and it was saying that back in 2021, they were actually valued at around 45 billion. So it's kind of interesting. This is definitely a significantly lower valuation, but still definitely they raised a good amount of money for their IPO. So when I was doing some research, it was saying that they raised about 1.37 billion from this IPO. Now, I did check the stock price and they are trading around like $45 a share still today. So there's definitely a lot of interest to kind of see like how it does over the next couple of months, how it grows and things like that. But the CEO, he was definitely saying like he does feel that this is a good market for Klarna. He has a lot of ideas on how they can grow and get more customers and things like that. So that is, kind of interesting. And then one thing that was also kind of interesting with their IPO is that Klarna is actually allowing their employees to kind of sell off their shares during the IPO window. Now, that's actually pretty rare. It was saying that Airbnb kind of did this as well, but it's not very common because there is kind of risk that it could lead to kind of like insider knowledge and things like that. So it was saying that employees, they do have the opportunity to kind of take advantage of this time up until September 30th. Now, again, this is pretty rare. Like typically most employees can't really sell off their shares for about like 6 months. So it is kind of interesting that Klarna is allowing their employees to do this during this period. Now, if you're not really familiar with like the tech world, pretty much when there's like a tech startup, if the tech company needs employees, but they don't have a lot of capital to really go to salary, what they'll do a lot of times is give what's called equity. So that's kind of a part of like your compensation package sometimes. So most jobs will give you just like a regular salary, but in the tech world, you can definitely get like bonuses, and then you can also get equity. You can get shares, like ownership stake in the company that you're working for. And then the goal is that this tech company that you kind of got in at the ground floor, it'll do a big IPO, and then you're rewarded for being one of the first people to invest your time and energy into this company. So that's why it is kind of rare that employees can kind of take advantage of this within that 6 month window. But they did say it's not like violating anything. So it is kind of interesting. But I think, again, a lot of people are kind of curious to see how it does. Figma also recently did their IPO as well. So there is definitely a lot of like energy around like the tech space and these different companies going public. So I am not a financial advisor, so I'm not telling you to buy Klarna or Figma specifically or anything like that. But I definitely love to kind of talk about like what's happening in the world. So we are all knowledgeable and educated, but definitely consult a financial advisor. But yeah, I'm pretty curious about this, especially just because again, they did have to halt their IPO and we're not necessarily in the greatest market, I would say. Like the cost of goods is very high right now. So I feel like something like this might be appealing to consumers because they can kind of break up their payments. So we'll see, over the next year how Klarna does and what this turns out to be. But as always, what is one boring thing that you can do today to start fueling your rich life? Again, I'm your host, Joy Hicks. Thank you for watching and be sure to like and subscribe.